we're going to have a hybrid model, Philly plus remote. We
Yeah.
always had remote, but like Philly plus remote, to then scaling that down to almost like a co-working, like a Wildbit co-working space where we had an
Sure.
office, but it was transient, no permanent desks, to now we are
Yep.
back to fully remote.
Hey everybody, welcome to Leading from Afar, a podcast by remote leaders for remote leaders, aimed at sharing knowledge and experience to help make remote awesome within your companies. I'm Scott Markovitz. I was the first hire at Envision and helped build the foundations of the company, from marketing, sales, product, operations, and pretty much everything between. I've also mentored and consulted with hundreds of early stage startups, including a bunch of remote ones.
And I'm Tevi Hirschhorn. I've built and led design and product teams remotely, and I'm a longtime remote work evangelist.
Each episode, we'll speak about hot topics, trends, and the future of remote work. We'll also interview some super smart leaders at all levels of remote teams and introduce you to new tools that can help you succeed as a remote leader.
Hey, thanks for tuning into today's episode of Leading from Afar. I'm your host, Scott Markovitz. Today, I am super excited to be joined by someone that I've looked up to for quite a long time, a true OG of remote work, remote leadership, and basic leadership on building a world-class culture. It's Natalie Nagele, who is the CEO and co-founder of Wildbit. She joined me today to chat about hybrid remote and the impact it's going to have post-pandemic. We started off discussing Wildbit's journey from launching as a remote-first company, it was 20 years ago, to opening an office in Philadelphia for those that wanted it. Note I said wanted it. To then dropping that office during the pandemic. We discussed why many companies are looking at hybrid remote as the best option and what it really means to be successful doing it. We then spoke about how companies can engage their hybrid staff. We also touched upon proximity bias when it comes to career path and promotions for hybrid teams. So no surprise, there's so much wisdom in this episode. I hope everybody enjoys it.
Hey, Natalie, thank you for joining today. Super excited to have you here. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks, Scott, for having me.
It's a pleasure and an honor. Again, as we spoke offline, I've been a big fan of yourself and Wildbit, and certainly is one of the OG remote companies that have pushed a lot of great content on how to do certainly remote and leadership and employee culture and things like that. So I've been super excited to read all that over the years and very happy to have you here. So thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. So for season 2, we've been starting off with a question pulled from somewhere, like it's usually news or some kind of other format, to cover a conversation that's not really specific to the topic. So I was listening to a podcast last week with Sahil, the CEO from Gumroad, who was talking about interviewing async, doing async interviews. And very much it seemed pulling from there that the idea was he has no interest in actually speaking to anyone during the interview process, and potentially after they've joined the company as well. From a remote perspective, async is certainly going to be the future. It offers so much amazing opportunity in the remote space, but I'm very much, working remotely for 10 years, being very passionate about it. I feel like it's getting to be like a slippery slope. Like people who haven't been doing this so long see, hey, there's this amazing opportunity, and taking it too far towards the point of getting away from the idea of you hired people, at least I've hired people over the years, more on the culture and personality fit. Do they fit the team? Do they fit the business? Do they fit the culture? Do you feel like this is the person that I want to work with? And having that team camaraderie, that team feeling that, hey, this person is a part of the grand mission. They're connected to the mission. They're connected to the company, like this whole, big unity thing. And it feels like has the potential to kind of slip off into, okay, individual cogs who are part of the machine that have no interaction, no collaboration. There's none of that, no camaraderie. There's none of that part of that team mission. Am I just crazy? Or is there, again, the thought of maybe this being unfortunately taking on the wrong?
I don't think you're crazy. I also just think, generally speaking, we have to remember that there's all kinds of people looking for all kinds of things out of their careers. And I will say that, like in the early days, we've been in business 21 years and remote all of that time. The very first Wildbit employee was in Romania before there was chat, before there was Zoom, before there was chat. Sorry, there was like ICQ, but we were sending Western Union wires, right? This was like a very unknown thing. We hired most of our employees in the early days completely asynchronously. Maybe there was like some conversations, some kind of chat. Maybe at one point we did AOL chat, like all kinds of stuff in the early days. But folks weren't speaking English, or English wasn't because it wasn't their first language. Maybe felt uncomfortable speaking English, and we actually went through an entire transition before. There was one point we sent down voice over IP phones, like actual like desktop phones, folks could pick up the phone and call. Because video chat wasn't a thing. It was just Skype. But even that was really hard to use for those who remember what Skype used to be like. And so that was real. And when those folks, like you're talking about camaraderie, and like in a small team like that, when we first met for the very first time on our very first retreat in Cyprus, there was a small group of us, like 6 of us. When we got into a room together, there was like physical emotion. Like, there were tears, there were hugs. Like we were so connected to each other and had never spoken a word face to face with each other. Today, I could never imagine doing that. Of course, I want to see people. I want to talk to them. I want to understand them. But that's a very Wildbit current culture thing. And I had just hung out with Sahil a couple weeks ago in Mexico City. We were at a conference together and we spoke together about kind of employee future work, whatever you want to call it now. And I think he's built this incredible space where for folks who that's really important, they want to get in and they want to get out. They have their own. That's coupled with things like 20-hour work weeks or like flexible time and things like that, where there are people out there that absolutely just want to come in, make some money, do some good work for a great company, and then they have their own side projects, their families, their hobbies, their whatever that is, and aren't coming to work to build community. And both of those are, of course, okay. Thought leadership is funny because somebody like Sahil says something and you'll see a whole horde of folks like, oh, I'm going to do that too. And it's like, you got to pause and say, that is Sahil. And I have this general philosophy that all businesses are snowflakes, and that like there is no two businesses that are the same, because every human in that business, a business is a collection of human beings. No two human beings are the same. So what works for Sahil and Gumroad and the individual humans at Gumroad won't necessarily correlate directly. I think that's what remote work provides, is there is more option, right? And if we look at remote work less about rules, because now we're just taking the office. We had rules around the office, and now we're trying to create rules around remote work. We can say, hey, this is a cool way of thinking about the future of work. What fits my organization, my personality as a founder, as a hiring manager, blah, 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 insert your thing. So I don't know. I don't think you're wrong. I just don't think there's a one-size-fits-all philosophy here.
It's interesting. I wonder if it's maybe personality or role type. Like maybe for an engineer, okay, your head's down and code all day long anyway. So for that, you may not have the same interaction. But yeah, I don't know. I just have this idea of, Michael Jordan. When Michael Jordan was with the Bulls, again, he was the greatest player ever anyway. But there was a much difference when he was playing on the Wizards afterwards. It wasn't the same thing. Or if you look in football or soccer, Leo Messi, Barcelona, totally dominant, greatest player ever. When he plays for Argentina, it's a totally different, because he doesn't have the same pieces. There isn't that same teamwork, there isn't that same fluidness, and the same kind of, I think, shared mission. So yeah, I think it'd be definitely something interesting to have.
But I will say that, but I don't know that necessarily. I think you're right, and I will tell you that we have folks who've been at Wildbit for 16 years, 15 years, working together. And they spent most of their beginning of their careers working asynchronously and built an incredible bond. And they are like the A team. Like when they work together, they know each other. They understand what, I think you're right. It's personality type. It's the role. But some of what we've built a Wildbit is very much in service to like the kind of company I wanted to run in. Like I like people. I like talking to people. I like building cultures. That's exciting to me. So I don't know that 100%. If Chris on his own would have built this company like this. Good
question. So getting back on track for the show, the way we always start is to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about the origin story of Wildbit.
I'm Natalie Nagele. I am the co-founder and CEO of Wildbit. I run it with my husband, Chris. We have been doing it. The company's 21 years old. We've been doing it together for 17 or 18 years. Chris started it when he was 20 years old and dropped out of college and basically said, I'm going to do consulting work, and was doing like kind of brochure sites, lots of Flash for those who know what Flash is, or it doesn't exist anymore. And just as a way to make a good living, hired the first employee was, like I said earlier, the first employee was remote, based out of Romania, in a time when remote wasn't a thing. At that time, there was very little risk, and some incredibly talented folks outside the US who were just doing really innovative things. Some of our first folks on the team were Rails developers who like translated the book of Rails, whatever, into Russian, right? Like they were the first ones. And so there's a lot of opportunity there and a lot less risk. We pivoted from a consulting company into product company, and now only 12 years, maybe even more than that, have only run our own products. We have subscription SaaS products that support other software development teams, and also veering into a little bit more of how we work space with. We have a job board called People First Jobs that tries to connect other people first companies with incredible talent, and the other way around. So yeah.
Amazing. So I learned yesterday that the company did have an office for some amount of time in the Philadelphia area. It doesn't have one now. We'll get into that further. But did the company start as obviously outside the person in Romania, did the company start off as an office-based company with people coming to the office and then decided to go remote afterwards? Or the company started remote and said, hey, maybe we have a couple of people here who are in Philly, maybe they'd like to spend some time together working in an office, then you moved to the office, which came first?
Yeah, so we were always, just Chris and I, we either worked out of our house, or we worked one time we rented like a little office space just for the two of us to leave the house and have a space, almost like before co-working spaces were a thing. And we opened our first actual physical space right around the same time as we brought a few folks on H-1B visas into the US to help us kind of bring the products, kind of scale the products. And so when those folks were coming into the US, they inevitably chose Philly. Like, where else would they go? And so we now had 5 or 6 people that were in Philadelphia, and we were like, okay, we need a place to physically work together. I've talked about this before, but remote work is beautiful, but remote work, requires like a physical space in your house. And if you have a 1-bedroom condo, you don't have a space in your house to have work. We needed to give people a place to work. And so that was the origin of the office, and that continued for about 6 or 7 years. We had maybe 7 or 8 years we had a physical office before we ended up, we went from no office to like full-blown, we're going to hire in Philly, we're going to have a hybrid model, Philly plus remote. We always had remote, but like Philly plus remote, to then scaling that down to almost like a co-working, like a Wildbit co-working space where we had an office, but it was transient, no permanent desks, to now we are back to fully remote.
Interesting. Obviously, we see a lot in the news that many companies post-pandemic are deciding, hey, they want to move forward with the hybrid model, whether it's a 3-2 hybrid model, whether it's whatever type of capacity. And I think we'll dive into different types and what may work best. But why do you think so many companies are deciding on going the hybrid model versus going that fully remote model post-pandemic? Again, they saw the opportunities, hey, work gets done fantastically. It's pretty clear that people love, you have a good 30+% people don't ever want to come back to the office. Another 30-40% want to have that flexibility. So what do you think is that real driver to move towards the hybrid model?
I think there's probably 2 things at play. One is, to your point, there's a good chunk of people that really want to go into the office. And I think that's a real reality. And companies are trying to support both. I think we could talk about how we handle the whole remote thing. But I'm a big proponent of investing. If you're going to go the remote route, you need money to be able to bring people together. Like that togetherness is extremely important, to your earlier point about building community and actually working on hard things are really hard to work on remote. But the other side, I think, in some ways, is just it's a gradual effect, right? We all went into remote with intention, and we had a long time to process it and all these things.
Yep.
These companies were thrust into a world in which they're trying to pick up the pieces. And I have such respect for how hard that is for them. And so I think just migrating it back to figure out who's going to come in, who's not. Also, Scott, they all have leases. There's not really a practical way for some of these like huge corporate companies to be like, I'm giving all the space back.
Yeah.
I truly don't know.
Some companies
remote is beautiful. Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
And some work is easier done that way. Again, remote was a tech thing, right? Remote was a software developer thing. Software developers don't need a lot of interaction. They need a direction, and then they can run. You have salespeople. You have marketing teams. You have a lot of different types of creatives who like feed off each other's energy, who need to have meetings. And then you have companies that just do client services, and it's different. We were remote, but when we did client services, we were remote. A lot of our customers were local. We would meet with them. We would present things to them. We had one customer, our biggest customer at the time was in Virginia, but we would go to Virginia and see them. And those things are real. And I can see a world in which at least experimenting with figuring out that middle ground is really important.
Yep. Interesting. I've had the feeling that it's really more of companies, they understood, hey, work gets done fantastically, but there is none of that engagement. There is none of that community building. There is no relationship building, which I can understand. And I think the biggest issue or the biggest reason for that is over the years, right? Even when we were in office, we had cloud-based collaboration tools. We had Trello and Basecamp for project management. We had Envision, Freehand, and Mural for digital whiteboards. So even when people were sitting physically next to each other or in the same conference room, they were still using these cloud-based tools to do their job. So when you remove that office, the tools remain the same. So that collaboration, that work continued to move forward. But no one has thought about, how do we recreate those team building, those conversations, those serendipitous moments? No, I'm trying to solve myself. How do we recreate the communication and the team building? And for me, I think that's, at least to me, the reason why companies are looking to get back into at least somewhat of an office. But can't they really achieve that with a combination of doing some virtual things? Obviously, you said IRLs, whether it's a company get together, whether it's regional, whether it's enabling people to meet each other and work with each other and doing things like that. Isn't there a way to really achieve that team building and engagement, combining, again, those IRL aspects with hopefully tools that are coming out now to build relationships better virtually?
Absolutely. And I think that those things take time to understand in the individual cultures that these organizations have built. I want to take a more optimistic perspective. I think this is a step in the right direction and a change to say we have to figure out what this means to us. I want to caveat a little bit that community building in a team, in a company, is not always about making friends, but it is for some people. That's a really important aspect. And remote, virtually, like a lot of what we've seen over the last 2 years is superficial garbage. Like these Zoom things that we're all trying to do and try to create, that's not how relationships are built. And I don't think anybody's really cracked it, to be totally honest. We have not cracked it. We've been doing remote for 21 years. It is extremely difficult to build deep bonds with people without doing direct work together and without smaller group belonging. And there's a very performative aspect to what we're all trying to do, and like in a pandemic, trying to build bonds and trying to build community, and it's not going to, and you see this in the great part of it probably is this fear of, you see this great resignation, you see this like great reshuffling, you see all these things happening. People stay because they're committed to the people they work for. Like we know that that's one of those reasons, like when they do surveys, is, you know, people feel connected to their coworkers, to their managers. A lot of times it's less the mission and more like the people that they build community with day to day. Remote, goodness, that's hard. And we also arguably can't really base our decision on going remote for these big companies or companies that have never done it before based on their experience over the last year and a half, 2 years, because that's not real life. I also am curious to see how, I don't believe, and this is controversial, I don't believe the remote work is for everyone. Like I don't 100%. Actually think that it's mentally good. I don't think that it's physically good for folks. I think that it's a cost that companies have to start to incur. Honestly, like I have so many friends, lawyers, doctors, all these things that like all of a sudden they're like at their kitchen desk, who's paying for the extra bedroom? Who's paying for the bigger house, right? Like who's paying for the faster internet? Who's paying for the air conditioning and the heat that has to be on during the day? These are real, truly like real things that we're passing on to the employees. I have a great friend who walks to an office every day. She just can't. She doesn't want to be home. She wants to get dressed. She wants to leave the house. She's more productive that way. And so I think there's just generally a much more in like the gray area. It's what's exciting to me about this. What the pandemic did is it kind of, somebody said this and I'll steal it. Like it sped up a slow moving train, right? Like it took something that was going to get there eventually and a pandemic just blew past it. And now we have options, and optionality is where I get most excited about, is like now people, at least in the United States, we can say that, and broadly in the Western world, are now given this opportunity to say, what do I want? And remote is now a feasibility, not just for tech, but for lawyers, for accountants, for psychologists. My therapist is doing everything virtually, right? So now you're just giving people choice. And that choice is really exciting, more so than the dogmatic, like we now all have to be remote. And this whole thing is, how dare you go to an office?
Terrible. It's interesting here in Israel, it's the opposite approach where, again, everyone saw the value out of it. Everyone saw the increase in productivity and things like that. But here in Israel, there's still that push to get everybody back in the office now. Speaking about this, I've met hundreds of founders over the years, been trying to beat the drum for remote work, especially because like everywhere else, there's such a huge deficit in the amount of talent that's here. I read recently there were 20,000 unfilled engineering jobs, just engineering alone. Probably similar, were outsourced to different parts of the world. We just don't have enough people in this country. And while the real opportunity is to go remote, to open up your marketplace to the entire world, there's still that push and the force, okay, we got to hire here, we got to hire here. And to me, it makes absolutely no sense. And I would love to see where it goes and what is really that trigger that makes a decision to get past that and say, okay, we accept this as the future, whether we want it or not. And the only way we're going to grow, and I think I've seen a lot coming out of Paris and Berlin, meeting a lot of startups there over the last 2 years, coming with that same approach. Hey, there's only a limited amount of developers and UI designers, things in Paris or Berlin. And we know if we're not curing cancer, if we're not getting the people to Mars, we're simply not able to compete against Facebook and Google and so on and so forth, maybe not for long. So we have to be a remote first company from day one, because that's the only way we're going to grow. So it's interesting to see different cultures, locations looking at this opportunity in a totally different way.
I think there's a value to taking away the noise of like the news and everybody talking about it, and really reflecting on, is this the right thing for my company, for my personality, for the kind of culture I want to build? Back to like optionality. And now it is an option. I can find folks. Goodness, you can get so much support now, even just like operationally with like payroll companies and this kind of thing and that kind of. We didn't have any of that in the early days, and so there's so much more choice. And again, that speeding up of that slow moving train is like all of a sudden in the last 2 years, it's like almost overwhelming how much operational support there is to do a remote thing, and it has to be from a place of intention, right? Like what I'm seeing is nasty side of it where people are like, oh, we're going to do remote. And now how do I make sure that people are working? Natalie, what software do you use to spy on your employees to make sure that they're sitting at their desk?
What?
And I'm like, how about no software? Because I hire adults and that's not what I do. And it ties a little bit to, we run a 4-day work week for a long time, for 2017. And it's all related, right? Remote work to us is a lot around fulfillment and productivity and all of these things and work-life harmony and like all the things that are packed into it. And that's why we get to work 32-hour work weeks. But that's a super intentional step-by-step process that we've taken over the years.
Yeah. I've been saying for a while that what post-pandemic remote leaders like yourself, the big thing that needs to be done is killing off the moniker remote work. It's not about work, it's remote life. The location independence allows me to live the life that makes me happiest. And you can see it just more in the remote, actually in the remote work side. But I think you see it also in the issues and things that you're seeing with logistic companies and companies not being able to hire truck drivers and people working in a cafe or in ports because they know, hey, I could work for $15 an hour, working hard for 8 hours, or I can drive an Uber or a Lyft or deliver for DoorDash or things like that and work around my schedule, have a life, and fit work. So I think it's a beautiful thing that we're at the point for a long time, especially in the Western world, it was always you lived to work. And I think we're now getting to that point where that script is now flipping over to now you're working to live. You're now having the opportunity that your life is at center and work is now enabling you to live that life and kind of fits nicely within the puzzle versus being bookended. Okay, you have a little, maybe in the morning you have a little bit of life, at the end of the day, in the weekend that you have life, but the rest of the whole middle is very much work. So I'm really hoping that we see that finally switch over to the right way.
What's funny, and when you say that, where my mind went is for years we made fun of millennials for how much they saw the world that way. Like, why do I have to work to live? And everybody said they're so lazy and they're this and they're that. And then we get hit by this pandemic and we're all reflecting deeply on our lives and what we want to do and why are we even doing this and how much money do we need and all of these things and all of these tropes. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh no, we don't want to work to live. We want to live to work. Or sorry, we want to live. Yes, the other way. And
the other way.
Yeah, they've been telling you that, and you've been and everybody teased the millennials to say you're all so lazy, and it's no, there is a better way. This is not to get like super weird, but the robots, right? That's the joy, right? Why can't we live in a world where we as humans work less, and the robots do the things that we don't need to be doing? Let's redirect our fears a little bit and think about what's the purpose of being a human. And it's creativity, it's art, it's thinking, it's philosophy, it's love, it's joy, it's spending time together, it's building community, right? Let the robots do the other. Let technology do the thing it's supposed to do, which was supposed to make our lives easier, and instead we're just working harder, which is a whole other problem.
It's just life. When I went remote, I was able to take my kids to school every morning. I pick them up. I take them to after-school activities. I go to lunch with my wife once or twice a week. I can go on a hike every day. I get to live the life that I want to live. And work just seamlessly fits into that piece. And again, it's not okay. I have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go for a run because now I got to go commute. And now I come home and then I can maybe do something and watch Netflix for an hour before I fall asleep at 10 o'clock because my whole day in the block is in the middle. So I could rant on this for a long time, but I want to try to get us back on track. Obviously, your company was hybrid for a little while. I think there's lots of different hybrid models that are being spoken about. The forced 3-2 that Apple and Google and all of them wanted to go to, which they all had a mutiny on their hands and had to return on that one. There's the 3-2 optional, where you can decide which 3 days or 2 days you want to work here and there. Also, I think going all the way for what I believe is certainly the only possibility for remote to be successful is the office is a park. It's here if you want it, how you want it, when you want it, why you want it. And that's
we kind of you into that co-working space. Yeah.
Correct. hey, if you live in that one bedroom condo and you don't have fast internet or whatever it is and you need to see people, great. Here, come 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, whatever you want. If you want to come once every 2 weeks to have coffees with the colleagues and go to lunch and then go home to actually do work, hey, that's great too. Perspective, is there a right option for hybrid? If there is, what do you think is that ultimate?
I can't. No, there's no right answer. I do think there's things to look out for. We fell into some obvious now like issues where we first got an office. Chris and I are in the office. And so we're having side conversations. We're not sharing it back with the rest of the team. Now you have this huge issue of decisions are made with no context. Conversations are had, people are changing things, moving things around, and now you have an us versus them scenario. And that is a horrible place to be. That is poison. If you ask me what really, and then you have the other issue, which is, I think we've seen this even pre-pandemic, and we saw this a little bit too, which is we were on our way out of our office before the pandemic, kind of our co-working space office before the pandemic, because it ended up being one of those things where once everybody was comfortable at home, do I need to come in? And they would come in only with intention. There was something to do. So I think, truthfully, there's probably some value to say, hey, we have our weekly or monthly meeting. Let's all come in and have that meeting. Or let's have strategic moments of time where the face-to-face is just more effective. There's this thing that I've always believed that you can't replicate on Zoom. And we proved it. We tried our hardest over the pandemic, but you can't, when you're solving strategic long-term problem decisions or solving really complex problems, some of that work happens when you're not talking about it. We do quarterly offsites with our leadership team, and we try to do it remote. We did everything we could. We like snacks and happy hours and all the things. The first one we finally had together in person, it's dramatically different. It's sharing a meal together. 100%. It's taking a walk 100%. Together. It's going on a hike. It's cooking breakfast, whatever that is. The solutions happen then, and you build a level of trust in each other that, and we always said retreat was so critical. It would feed you for a year, and every new person would be like, oh, now I understand when you type this, you're not actually angry. That's just how you are. Or you start to pick up on those cues. I could see a world in which, to me, hybrid, if you have everybody in the same city or in the same vicinity and they collaborate closely together. There's a study that was done a long time ago at MIT. It was in a book called Peopleware a long time ago. And the idea was they were trying to solve for this issue of scientists, of researchers trying to figure out how to they spend most of their time deep in their work, but then there's this serendipity concept, right? This we bump into each other at the water cooler and gosh, we reinvent the world. And they realized, no, that's actually not true. That doesn't actually happen that way. We feel like it happens, but it doesn't. And so they built an office. They actually built a physical space. And I haven't researched this in a while, so I don't know where that space went, but they built a physical space that was designed for this mostly deep work capacity that intertwined in certain moments where you needed to come up for air, you would see other human beings. And that's kind of how I think of the hybrid solution. If you do have everybody in a physical space, and there's a lot of value to being in a physical space together, and even in the city together, there's a collective community building that I think we're very tribal. And I still think there's something really beautiful about being committed to a physical location together. In the way that you can use that physical space to build those moments of connection, build those moments of deep conversations. I'm sorry, Mural's a lovely software. Whiteboarding on a screen just, for me, is extremely painful. I want to be able to scribble. I want to sit back and look at it for 5 minutes. I want to feel the energy of folks in the room when I put something on a whiteboard and it's not received well. We're having difficult conversations. It's hard to picture that with 6-7 people. I can grab a pen from somebody and go scribble on a whiteboard real quick and get some really great things out of it, and it's much harder. But you don't need it all the time, is I guess my point. These are strategic moments in time. So for us, we have a cadence, an annual cadence, where we all pause and plan together for a week. No work is done, and then we go back, and then we go deep into our work. Strategically, like I said, the leadership team means quarterly. We do it as an offsite. We do it physically in person, and then we're off to the races, right? We don't need whiteboarding. We don't need any of that stuff. But for that 3 or 4 days, it's critical. So I think like when you talk about hybrid, I would want to see that, sure, use it as a co-working space, fine. But I would also really want to see it be used with intention. Okay, the leadership team means here, or every time we kick off a new project, we get together for a week here. Every Tuesday, let's all just come in and collaborate on stuff. And that becomes like a really powerful space. It becomes a home base. It becomes like a grounding mechanism of this is how we're all connected to something. But it doesn't need to be, obviously, I think a 3-2, like those kind of things are goofy because there'll be weeks at a time when you're deep on work, and why would you commute? You just want to go to work and do your work. And then you come up for air, and then you should collaborate.
Yeah, I think that'll lend to my next question. But from some of the companies that I was consulting with, getting them moving over to the, we'll call it a proper remote model, now that was one of the suggestions that I made. If you're all in the same city or in a relative area, again, why do you need to be in the office X amount of days? Why not, maybe a case of rent an Airbnb villa, once a month, once every 6 weeks, get everyone together, have a catered barbecue and a pool, and people have fun and have the interaction in real life. They can do those whiteboarding sessions. And again, that's the in-person opportunity. Again, do people need to come into the office 3 times a week, 2 times a week, or just, like you've mentioned, have the intentionality of once every X amount of time, we need certain teams, all the team to be in one place, get it together, have a good time, do what you need to do, and then go back out and focus at home to keep working. But your 3-2, when it brings up a question, which like a lot of companies want to seemingly look in this direction. For companies that are going to move to a 3-2 model, your thoughts of, should companies look to get all the people back into the office those 3 days to have that overlap? Or is it better to give that flexibility to let each individual employee decide of what 3 days they want to be in the office?
The only correlation I have a strong opinion is when we launched our 4-day work week. Our first iteration of that was to let everybody pick their 5th day off. And that didn't work for us because what ended up happening was the way we work, at least, is like nobody works truly in isolation. We work in extremely small teams, 2 or 3 people, but it created all kinds of challenges where like somebody who's off on Tuesday would need to work with somebody who's off on Friday, and there's no interaction, there's no connection, standing meetings, things like that. Let's say we have like our monthly all hands, like it just became really tricky to collaborate. And so we actually pulled that back and said everybody's off on Fridays except for our support team, that they alternate Fridays and Mondays. But that allowed us to just basically consistently, Wildbit works Monday through Thursday for the most part. I could see a similar thing. Either some folks would be creatures of habit and come in the same time. Some folks won't. And I think it depends. I could see a world where it could get really tricky because if you're a team of 3 and 2 people come in on Tuesday and you're at home, they're going to inevitably sit around a table together because that's when they get to see each other, and they're going to talk about some things, and they're going to have discussions, and they're not going to be intentional in excluding somebody, but something's going to get missed in context. So again, back to that, if you're going to force people, then give them some parameters, I think. Otherwise, you're goofy. There's a lack of correlation. I don't quite follow the logic. If you're going to force people to come in, but you're not going to tell them why you're forcing them to come in, there's no intention or purpose behind it, then you're just like babysitting your team. And I get real annoyed with the babysitting of people, because if you're babysitting your people, you have some serious issues around management and product and measuring outputs and success and all kinds of things that are just all kinds of goofy. So either you just say we're an on-prem team, and that's what we are, and that's our culture, and like, it is what it is. Cool, that's fine. There's going to be plenty of people who love that. Or you say we come in for these reasons, and that's why we're all in together. Or you say it's just an open co-working space. Have at it. It's yours to use, that we're going to, as a company, provide you the physical space to do your best work. There's that little bit of a gray area there for me where I'm like, if you're just doing it to measure the butts and seats, I got no tolerance for that. That is a organizational disaster, and that is your problem, and you go fix that real fast because that's doomed to fail eventually.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've felt that on one side, having the consecutive days makes sense for that overlap, to have people there at the same time so you can do the engagement. And again, it's much easier for a company than to do their office culture that they know how to do when people are on site. But I look potentially on the other side. Now if everyone's on site for 2 or 3 days, the same days, well, now's the great opportunity for doing those FaceTimes, right? So you have your all hands meetings and your team meetings and your one-on-ones and your this meeting, When are you supposed to actually get work done during the day? If you're sitting in 6, 7, 8 back-to-back face-to-face meetings, you're in the office now. So we're going to take advantage of you being here in the office to do
Scott,
all these interactions.
How many back-to-back Zoom meetings does everybody? But how many back-to-back Zoom meetings does everybody have? To me, that's a company culture thing. I have a friend who works for a company, 8 back-to-back Zoom meetings a day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's no different.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, how do companies think about this? Because they see the productivity, right? During remote, productivity went like this. Fantastic, wonderful. Now, in theory, if you come back to the office, now you're back to
So did burnout, for the record.
Oh, yes. Another conversation.
But that's not any relevant. Productivity went up and burnout went up. And so I'm weary of the productivity numbers. Can we just for a second? Because we were at home. We had no place to go. We buried ourselves in work because we were so scared of what was going on outside of our doors.
Thank you.
I don't know that we can, again, I just think that there's a real danger of marching on the beat of that drum. That was a unique moment in time. I'm a big, remote work is 100% more productive, but not for everyone.
Yes, thank you for saying that. I've been saying the same thing. Hey, this is not remote work. This is chaos. Why you burned out? Why do you have no interaction? Because you can't leave the house. You can't even go to the cafe. You can't go to the supermarket. You're just locked in your house. You want to get out of the house. So what else are you going to do? Especially if you have kids. I have 4 kids. A couple of them were learning on Zoom. So everything, I need the iPad. When am I supposed to get work done? So I need to now organize my schedule to be at different times and now to try to catch up because I missed some of that time. So yes, it makes sense in that scenario why people were working past 5 o'clock, why people were, in theory, working more because they had nowhere to go. There was nothing else to do. Maybe they had an impact at home on what was going on with their family. Yeah, so then how that ties back to the office. If the company now sees, okay, where productivity is going down, which in theory it should go down either way after the pandemic ends, does that change their mindset? Saying, oh, does that push them back to remote? Hoping, oh, okay, now they're getting people back in the office. Productivity has gone down because now we're doing all these face-to-face meetings. They're not actually doing work. So they have to commute and Well, maybe we should move back to remote because then we're going to, in theory, get all that productivity back. I think it's a cycle. Is it?
You know what I was thinking? You're saying how successful you personally are, and I find it extremely admirable. Yep. I'm not that good at it, even after all this time, where I feel very required to be in front of my screen. Like it's something I'm constantly working on, and the way we think about the computer, Chris has this thing. He says, I want to think of it as a sewing machine. You don't sit in front of your sewing machine waiting to sew something. You go down, you sew something, and then you walk away, and then you come back when it's time to work. And it sounds, at least from what you shared, that's how you view it. And I think that's brilliant. And probably earlier when we were a smaller company, that's also how we used to have lunches. Now it's different now. But anyway, but I think to your point, the answer to that isn't like more productivity, less productivity, meetings in person, meetings on Zoom. It's a general. The future of work is questioning what work is. What is actually performative? What is actually productive? What are we actually doing with our time? What are you hired to do? My friend who I was saying, like back-to-back 8-hour meetings, she's an extremely important executive at a humongous company. And I'm like, they didn't hire you to sit at meetings, but there's something broken in the way that they measure output. And so the remote is irrelevant, technically. The remote just pushed us to say, oh, okay, hold on a second. I can't value your output based on seeing you physically in an office now. Okay, what am I going to measure you on? And where the companies that are struggling with it is the ones who are like, oh, now I just need you in a meeting all the time. We just have to talk all the time because how am I going to know if everything's working or not? So I don't actually worry in the way that you do about the companies like using that time physically in the office, unless they already have those structural issues. Like, to me,
makes sense.
There's probably some risk there, but I would imagine those same companies who are like, let's have a one-on-one, let's have a group meeting, let's have a stand-up, are probably doing that on Zoom. So I don't know
Fair
that
enough.
necessarily. My theory, my perspective, I don't know, not even a theory. My perspective is that there's enough broken, we've seen enough broken in the going remote thing that they're just still not able to unstick output, purpose, meaning, and like intention behind work, right? If you think about, most of our work is performative, right? Why are we checking email all day long? Why are we working on things that don't actually matter? Why are we sitting in meetings? That's the kind of magic, right? The magic is, I need to do this one thing this week to dramatically move my business forward. And I need to trust myself. That is the only thing I need to do. And therefore, I can get rid of all the other shit that's on my plate. Most of us are like, well, I can't just do one thing. Like, I got to do all these other things, and I got to wait for something to happen so I can get that dopamine kick of reacting to a thing. And so that's the kind of stuff, to me, that's much more critical to looking at like successfully living and not working to live. That is the really truly identifying what's important. Why are we doing this? What do I need from my team? What do they need from me? What's the actual thing they need, not the thing that my brain is scared to let go of? And then we can remote, not remote. Like, you're starting to really understand, I got to go in the office because I got to do this really creative thing with my team, and that's beautiful, but I'm going to go deep into my work on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because I just got to write the memo, put the presentation together, write the code, whatever. And there's no questioning. Because it doesn't matter. Because I'm being measured on what I'm delivering value to the organization, full stop. The rest is irrelevant.
Moving to another question, how does, especially in the hybrid environment, how does FaceTime not become the differentiator between promotions and career growth? I think there's been a lot written about this, the potential of, and many executives I've spoken to have all admitted that they would be much more likely to hire or promote someone that they have more of a relationship, a face-to-face relationship with someone that they don't have with. How can companies prevent this as we move forward to having that proximity bias really affect who moves where within an organization?
I think it's in a similar vein to really being articulate about what is success. What does it look like when it's not face-to-face? We have all biases just generally, right? And so there's the people we work most closely with, the people we identify with, all of these things. You add that, I have lunch with them, they're fun, I connect with them, I know what they're going through. I make excuses for worse performance because they're going through something personally, life, whatever. I think if you're in an organization where there is real individual growth value and promotions and outputs and things like that, I think the only way you protect yourself from your own biases, even if you don't intend to, is to just really outline it, right? These are the types of projects. This is the type of results that we're looking for. This is the impact on the business. And it can come from anybody. But ultimately, this is the issue with hybrid, right? If most of the people that report to you, if you're the person in charge of making those decisions and you have an us versus them scenario, that's a problem. And I think that's an organizational problem, right? If you have a people manager who wants to be in the physical space, who is very social in that way, very much connects with people on a one-to-one basis, it's probably not ideal to have that person manage half remote and half in-person folks. There's organizational shifts that have to happen. It's probably better, maybe better, to have a manager that's directly managing the remote team, and then let the managers duke it out on what that means for the organization. Don't put employees at risk there. There's just there's still this, running a business is about managing people, and every human is unique. And so I don't think you have to what's the company, what's the culture, what do we generally value? And then if you're going to make a dramatic shift of where we used to be on-prem and now we're going to not be in whatever variety, you have to go back to the top and be okay, who are we? What do we value? What's important? And then bring that down and say, oops, now we have to reconfigure, right? does that match with the people we have? And we really like these people and they're really important to the business and they're providing a lot of value. Maybe we got to reconfigure the top, or maybe we got to rejigger some things. I don't think this is like you have such structural changes that happen. You can't just like business as usual and like with some tweaks. To me, it becomes a very, this shit is hard. Like, this isn't supposed to be easy. You don't just like one day wake up and say a 3,000 person organization spread out all over the world in giant towers is now going to be like managed, led, operated remotely, hybridly, whatever. Like these are just, it's got to be thoughtful.
Yeah. Last question. I know we're running low on time. How will potentially a hybrid affect compensation? I know there's obviously people at Google and other companies are saying they're going to reduce salaries for people who are moving out, and we'd love your thoughts on that. But the one question I've been asking around this, is it the location or is it the physical presence in the office? Because in the example, you have somebody that's in San Francisco that wants to work remotely. They don't want to come to the office. So another person still lives in San Francisco. They didn't move out to Idaho, or they didn't move to wherever they are. They're in San Francisco, but they're working remotely and not in the office. Do you take salary away from that person that's in San Francisco, but is not coming into the office? How do you see this playing out here?
So we just launched location agnostic pay this summer. We're a distributed company and basically standardized around the Philadelphia area. That's our baseline. It's where we're headquartered in the Philadelphia area, and that's what we did. That's a very personal decision. It's not a cheap decision. It's a very intentional decision. But what it did for us was create a very clear line. We pay Philadelphia-based salaries. We do not pay San Francisco-based salaries. If you are looking for a San Francisco-based salary, we are just not the organization for you. I think of course, I can understand from the employee perspective, like I'm going to deliver the same amount of value to this organization. Why in the world would you pay me less? I get that.
That's my question.
I get that. And I also can see a world where that's another, not to like constantly defend these big companies, but that's a tricky thing to rejigger your math when you're a giant organization that kind of forced all of our expenses and our value to a geographic area. So like there is like a question there around, personally, I guess I would say that I could see a world in which you say like, we're just doing it and either come to San Francisco and show up in the office and we put value on that as an org. They're probably wrong, but that's what they do and that's okay. That's their prerogative to do that. And folks have to make a choice. I think like the market will readjust in some ways to say, if we've been defending the FANGs and saying, go work there, you're going to make a boatload of money, work's going to be hard and it's going to be like long hours and all these things, but like that's reality. It's authentic. It's not, they're not hiding anything. And there's plenty of people who want to make that choice and the market adjusts. And then people who don't want that choice, they come to Wildbit. This is just another market adjustment. Now we're all remote, or a lot of us. And so now I used to be remote and everybody's like, I'm coming to Wildbit to be remote. And it's like, now everybody's remote. I can't even use that as like a big driver, a big incentive. But the market will adjust to those organizations who, if they want to place value on location-based pay, and that's their math, and there's room for that. It's going to take a while for San Francisco to adjust if you remove that. Rents have to go down, things have to go down. Location-based pay is not evil. It's just a thing we've done for a long time. I generally don't think most things are evil. There's some things that are really evil, but like location-based pay isn't evil. What's evil is if it's not transparent. What's evil is if it's not honest. I have very little sympathy for software engineers and like software jobs because the market is bonkers right now and anybody can get a job anywhere. So I have much more concerns about like my local grocery store workers and like how are we helping them? They can't work remotely. They can't have the flexibility of time. So, you know, I do think that's like a market adjustment in tech, and those companies have to adjust their math to defend, to support whatever it is that they've created. And the rest of us can do location agnostic pay and be cool with that too. And then now you have a choice, right? You can say, I don't want to work for a FANG. What are we calling it now? Mang? I don't even know. What do we have to call it now? It's goofy. I don't want to work for them because I want to live in Idaho and I don't want a pay cut, although probably the pay cut is still really high. It's probably still more than I would pay. I don't know. And then you can go and look, okay, where are the Wildbits of the world or whoever who maybe Idaho is still lower than Philadelphia and I can still make more money basing it on that. Philosophically, of course, I don't think we should pay less based on the output of work.
Yep.
Or based on location versus the output of work. But I also just let them do them. There's so much other stuff that they provide to people in their careers that I think is, I don't know. They have their own philosophies and missions. Sorry, that's not the answer everybody wants to hear. Everybody wants me to say they're evil.
That's the important to get perspectives. They're very easygoing. I'm the total opposite. It's a value to the company. Two people doesn't matter where they are. If they put in the same value to the company, they get paid the same thing based on
value. That's the thing. Like employees, unfortunately, don't get to measure the value, and that's where they have to make a choice around where they work. The company measures value, and I don't think it's been defined as simply as I write the same amount of code. I agree with that. Of course, I'm like that's why we have location agnostic pay. But I also think that the company ultimately pays you and ultimately is measuring the value the way that they see in their journey and like what they're trying to do. And there's math there and there's incentives. Like all of those things have incentives, right? So like they're making a choice because they're incentivizing some behavior. I can't begin to understand what that one is, but they're doing something that it's either going to be great for them or it's going to bite them in the ass. And that's on them to figure out.
Fair enough. I could keep talking for probably another few hours. I know you're probably quite busy, so we'll have to cut it here, but certainly appreciate the insights and the honesty and the approach of being, I think, very easygoing. I seem to be very opinionated, so it's nice to get a different opinion for some of these things and just not hear me ranting on things I'm passionate about. But I certainly appreciate you joining, and if there's anything that we can include, or how can people find out about Wildbit? How can they find out more about you and all the amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah, all the content's on wildbit.com. We have a newsletter. There's some interesting stuff coming out soon. I think for folks looking for companies like this, we launch People First Jobs for a reason. There's incredible organizations on there, not just Wildbit. There's unbelievable companies that really prioritize people, remote work, calm work environments, all kinds of things. So like from that perspective, please, I'd love for more folks to find great places to work, to make choices, right? To allow that market readjustment to happen. You got to find the great people. And so there's great organizations on there that we're really excited to partner with on this People First thing.
Awesome. Natalie, thank you so much for joining today. And until next time, everybody.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks again, everybody, for tuning into today's episode of Leading from Afar. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can learn more on our website, leadingfromafar.com, and subscribe to the podcast in your favorite app. This podcast is all about you, the remote leaders. We'd love to hear from you with your feedback or ideas for future topics and remote leaders we should be speaking with.